Hey guys, and welcome to the Cartoon Overload Show. I'm Carl Jacobs, and this is a cartoon retrospect where each week a guest comes on in with a cartoon from their childhood to discuss. I'm here with, the gumball to my...
Darwin?
Darwin, there we go. Johnny Hayes.
Hi, guys.
I forgot that we did that.
Oh my god,
I was put on the spot. And our guest of the week, we have today... Nate Lamagna.
Hey, hello.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Nate.
So I think most people would probably know me as Vrunt online, a notorious internet persona, I guess. Cartoon fan as well, incidentally. But yeah, I'm a goofball. People say I'm a little bit silly, a little bit funny, and yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Beautiful.
I genuinely stand by... If you are following anyone on Twitter, Nate's like very high tier, like you gotta be one of the funniest people on the planet, and I will like stand by that wholeheartedly.
I think it's let's say you're just logging into the internet for the first time. Maybe like wait a little bit, but like once you're like, all right, I've like sampled the like normal stuff, like yeah, sure, check out a little bit of variety from your old pal Vrunt.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And actually today we have another, I'm going to say weird, I think is a good word for what we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about Felix the Cat, the movie from 1988. Well, actually, we're going to go into the facts pretty soon, but Johnny, you go ahead.
1988, because we usually pull out like facts and stuff and, go through IMDb trivia and the wiki and try and find some interesting things about the show or movie. But it seems like this movie is like tried to be erased from history, because every time I try to find something, I just can't. And I like, the one fact that I keep finding is that apparently it was originally supposed to release Thanksgiving of 1988, but due to the bankruptcy of New World Pictures, it got a limited release in April of 1991, and then a video release the following August. So everywhere it says that the 1988 movie, Felix the Cat the movie, but maybe the 1991 movie, Felix the Cat the movie.
I feel like that's such a good, like, it's only on brand, though.
Yeah.
It's really... It's a trip. I don't even know where to start.
As far as I can tell, so a little bit of background, because it is like a weird origin. Mm-hmm. The son of the creator of Felix the Cat wanted to make this actually as I guess a TV show pilot.
Okay.
Somehow it became a full-length movie by this Hungarian-American director, and they moved the production to Hungary. And this is like 1986 that this is taking place. So this is still like communist control Hungary. This is not like, European Union stuff. And like, we can get into obviously the rest of the movie later. Like, some of that like Soviet overtones is like very strong in this.
Yeah, now that you mention it, it's definitely there.
And then there was a worldwide recession right when the movie was about to come out. And so I think it released in like maybe Italy or something, and nowhere else for like a year and a half. And then I only saw it on VHS in like 91, 92 probably.
That's so wild.
That's incredible.
But yeah, one hell of a journey to make this movie, apparently.
And I'm glad that it came out, because this is like the weirdest trip that I've ever been on, for a movie. If you haven't seen it yet, you should probably go watch it. I literally found it for free on YouTube, but I'll tell you, probably go buy it. Wink. I don't even know where to start. Like, I watched this movie literally 2 times in the past 24 hours, and I don't even really understand it.
Felix the Cat is this, like, classic cartoon character, like, before my time, and I don't really know that much about the character other than he's, like, Mickey Mouse, kind of, like, a little bit of a trickster side to him. But, like,
yeah.
I don't think Felix the cartoon, the old cartoon, was anything like this movie.
And that's my question, because I obviously know the character Felix the Cat, and I've like seen it everywhere. Apparently, I'm looking it up. Its first appearance was in 1919. But
jeez, wow.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, and the first time I had a voice was in 1936. But even like, I've never once watched anything about Felix the Cat, to be honest. And this is my entrance to it, and I'm like questioning, has it been like this forever? Like, I really don't know.
I really don't think so. This is like, it seems like somebody's like Alice in Wonderland themed like Dungeons and Dragons campaign that they were like,
100%.
you know what? I've got this all written out. Like, what if we just put Felix in this?
Yeah.
Like, there's no, not, and I feel like everything that I'm gonna say might sound like a complaint, but I really enjoyed this movie so much. So if it sounds like I'm being so hard on it, yeah, that's definitely not intentional, but like there really is like almost no structure to this movie. Like it doesn't, I don't understand how you can put it in like a 3-act structure.
Yeah, they don't spend that much time getting him to this like alternate dimension kingdom.
Yeah.
And then they kind of rush through showing him through places, and then he's like imprisoned throughout a very long second act. And then he gets out, there's like a brief like interlude, and then he wraps things up within like 9 minutes at the end.
Yeah.
And it's by throwing a book. Like,
Right.
There was definitely a point when I was watching this that I was like, oh, they're gonna get out. I guess the movie's like kind of over and it's gonna be wrapping up, and then they get captured again, and I was like, there's only 7 minutes left. Like they just got captured. This is like a setup for a third act. There's like not enough time for a full third act to happen, so I have no idea how they're gonna fix this, and then they just kind of do. And I feel like that's a lot of the things that happen in this movie. I just don't think about it, and then it happens, and then I look back up at the screen and I'm like, oh man, we've made a lot of progress. Like there's a lot that just happened that I missed.
I think that's a big thing too, is that I feel like it moves so quickly to the point where honestly, like if you can't like look away for 30 seconds because like something will happen.
Right. It's interesting in that there's a lot of visuals, and it is a movie where it's almost like this tone poem of like showing off what this like whole world is that we only see like a sliver of. You know, you get this like feel for the politics and the weird creatures that are there and the environment, but they don't linger on any of it. It just moves very, very fast.
That's something me and Johnny were talking about beforehand. There's like a scene earlier in the beginning where he just like, where Felix walks into a cave and then sees just a human skeleton, just like the head. And he like stops, looks down, laughs at it for like 30 seconds. and then it like bites his bag, and then nothing happens with it. Like they just move on. Like it didn't happen. And I was like, this whole bit was for just that. Like it didn't go anywhere. It was so funny.
There's these weird vestiges of like those old cartoons where it's just like, all right, we're going to have skeletons playing their own rib cages as xylophones for a while. And like Felix the Cat movie obviously doesn't do that directly, but there's these weird like, Felix gets distracted easily by his own jokes, and then there's some sort of visual gag, and then the consequences disappear because you're going on to the next thing.
Yeah. That's 100% what it is. It reminds me, the pacing of the movie and like the flow of it kind of reminds me, I don't know if either of you guys have ever watched The Army of Darkness.
Oh yeah.
Like the Evil
Yeah,
Dead sequel.
yeah.
It feels a lot like that, and it's weird how much it feels like that.
I never thought about it that way, but now I'm having to come to terms with it because I think you're right.
But here's the thing, is that Army of Darkness came out after, I just checked, it came out after this Felix the Cat movie, so it wasn't just like biting off of its flow or anything.
So
I'm thinking maybe Sam Raimi must have watched this Felix the Cat and like had a brain blast.
There are like elements of horror in this movie.
Oh, for sure.
I forget if I told you this when I pitched this particular movie as what we could talk about, but like the scene with the headhunters, like that visual like burned into my little kid brain. Like
really?
That is a horrifying like creature design and idea of these like skeleton bird kind of like cannibal tribe that's going off after these these lovable cartoons and trying to decapitate them is like, that's a lot. That's a lot for a kid to be subject to.
And then don't they resolve that just by Felix pulling hats out of his bags and then like
yeah.
Oh my gosh. You guys need to watch it if you haven't yet. I have to say that one more time. Like I don't think there's going to be one insightful thing that's going to be able to be said about this movie is what like I'm coming to terms with is like it's such a odd movie and for some reason it works and it shouldn't is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it reminds me too, if you've ever played any of the old Oddworld games, like Abe's Odyssey, like the picture of society, this like gross, like swampy alien creatures living in like this like oppressive, like early industrial hellhole is like very much reflected in the Felix the Cat movie, and I wonder if like they were both like Soviet like falling Soviet Union inspired.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. I had never noticed that before, but once you did mention all the Soviet Union inspiration kind of things that did happen in this movie, I'm starting to really like kind of line back through it and think about how much more there was to it that I really wasn't seeing. That I think this is very much, I don't know if, well, I don't think this movie would be made this way today, but I don't know if you can make this movie in any time other than when it was made under the specific situations it was made.
Oh, for sure. There's a line early on when you meet the Duke of Zil, this the big overarching bad guy, and you see his tragic backstory is he's trying to build this robot army. He says it will revolutionize labor, and that he'll be hailed as like this like amazing visionary.
Yeah.
And that backfires, and he's exiled. I guess because he was mad about it. It's not really clear why.
Well, it says he was horribly wounded in the incident, and then.
Yeah, they're just like, you gotta go, man. This is weird. But yeah, he's trying to like change the structure of labor in industry, and like that's like a very weird, like, once again, you couldn't make this any other time period because like it's just not the same. It like there's no climate quite like late 90s or late 80s, early 90s.
There really isn't. That's 100%. It's such a timestamp is what it is, because like again, like all of the movies that I related to, like Army of Darkness for instance, came out in the same like little
era,
generation.
kinda.
Yeah, era I guess would be the right way to call it. But like neither of them did Felix the Cat, this movie, did it do well in terms of like response, or like
I think the critical reception in general was not great, and then I think based on that, I don't know monetarily how well it did, but in terms of reviews, everything I've read was that it's never really been thought of highly.
Yeah, I still have the Wikipedia open. I was at the world recession page, and it's just like 4 clicks back to get to the Felix the Cat movie. It cost $9 million, and it only brought in a little under $2 million.
Yeah, I'm looking at that too. It says box office, and that could have something to do with apparently its initial release wasn't everywhere, so I'm not really sure how much of a part that plays, but also that's not looking good.
Yeah. It's weird too because I don't know, as a kid and still now, like I love the idea of the Felix the Cat character. Like he's fun, he's like, very expressive, and to say, oh, we have the rights to this, like, well, let's make a movie about him, and to make such a tonally dark piece just does such a disservice to the character. And I don't mean that in a way that I'm saying the movie is bad. It's just a really weird direction, and it's no wonder that people weren't receptive to it.
Yeah. And it makes for weird interactions for Felix the Cat, because Felix in and of himself is such a bizarre character to me, how he like really is like, I don't even know how to describe him. He's just fearless, and
Yeah, I think the message I sent to you before recording this while you were watching the movie was Felix fears no God.
And yeah, and I think I responded, I think Felix is God, question mark. Like, that's so, it's so true. Like, even when he was, like, put into prison, he was like, oh, this is a good time for me to get some rest.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you just got put into
Yeah,
prison.
he gets thrown into prison the second time in like 15 minutes, and his response is, this is kind of becoming a habit. Well, I should get some rest. And then he lays down and just kind of waits for whatever happens next in life to happen.
Yeah, he reminds me of the Onion cartoon that they do I think it's the Onion. The Lucky Duck.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
And I can't remember his foil, the like capitalist cat who's always like mad that Lucky Duck gets a good break because, you know, he's poor. And so, yeah, all the time he's like, oh boy, a welfare check. Like, this is just perfect. And yeah, Felix is the same way where like the things that are supposed to get him down, he's just like amused by them.
And everything should be getting him down. Like, it doesn't make sense. And I love it so much. He's such a good character. Like, I wrote down like a few of the quotes, and the one that really had me rolling was whenever he got like, I guess, went through into the interdimension, like whatever, and he just like lands in this swampy, dreary, gross place, and he goes, yuck, where are we, New Jersey?
Yeah, I wrote that one down too, because it's such a dumb throwaway line that's like, you know, obviously it's meant for us as the audience, the viewer, but like Felix the Cat is saying this to like somebody who has no idea what New Jersey is. Like, this is for no one's, you know, story-wise, no one's amusement but his own.
And I feel like that's the case for a lot of the scenarios with Felix. It's just, it's all for just like for him, you know what I mean? And I guess he doesn't really care about anybody else ultimately.
But not even, I think that's putting it even like, it makes it sound a little cynical, where it's not that he doesn't care about anyone else as much as he's just like having such a good time that he's like...
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm still trying to find like a barrier to like start talking about things that happen in the movie, but there's just so much of it.
I have another one.
Okay, yeah, you go.
Whenever he breaks into the was it the princess's room, and he goes, "Excuse me, Your Highness," and then the second she goes to say something, he goes, "Shh, we're gonna break out of here." And I'm like, was your whole intention of that just to like have her, like just to shush her? Like, it was, he waited for her to say something and then shushed her. And I thought it was so funny. It's just these throwaway lines that I think add together to make Felix such a funny character. Also, I had a question. Is his bag in the rest of like his I mean, I have no idea about anything about Felix the Cat outside this movie now, but like, is that bag a reoccurring thing?
Yeah, I believe so. As far as I know, like, the usual Felix the Cat story is he has this bag of tricks that he uses to have a good time.
Yeah. And
the professor is like very jealous of this like infinite potential that he has that he's wasting on, you know, goofing off.
Yeah.
So it's usually like, yeah, Felix is trying to have fun. The professor is like, I need that bag for science, and that's when they butt heads.
And it makes for such a good experience.
Yeah. That was a whole plot line that immediately confused me when I was watching the movie. Was it cuts to the professor and it's his nephew, correct?
Yeah, his nephew Poindexter.
Yeah. It just randomly cuts to them at some point and they're like, man, Felix is back at it. And then they don't really get addressed for another like 25 minutes, and then all of a sudden they're like in the alternate dimension with him. And I was just having so much fun. Like, anytime they showed up on screen, I was like, I don't really understand why they're in the movie or, like, what they're doing other than just being like, let's go get the bag. And then they just end up in this, like, medieval hellscape. And they're just kind of, like, doing their thing there.
Their presence is so shoehorned. I think it's, like, the second time we really see them is they're trying to follow Felix through the portal. And they're wandering around this gold mine. and the nephew Poindexter has this like TV screen that's just showing them clips of what's going on with Felix at the time.
Yeah.
Stuff that we don't see firsthand. We see him getting like kidnapped and dragged to some awful circus that we only experience through their monitor. And then the nephew like busts out with, hang on a second, Uncle. Look, at the name of this gold mine is Ariano, but it's backwards is spelled Oriana, which is the name of a mysterious kingdom that's nobody's ever heard of before, but we can go there now, so let's go. I was like, hang on, wait a minute. Slow down here, kid.
Yeah, you just kind of have to like take a step back and just understand that it's all right. You're not gonna understand what's going on for some of it, but it's still just great
it's the sort of thing
experience.
in the script. There was just like a blank section, and somebody wrote in the margins like, "Justify the professor coming here," and like that was like the last thing they did was like, hang on, okay, the nephew just knows that it's there and has a machine for it, so let's roll, let's wrap this up.
Yeah, and the nephew's smart because he's wearing glasses, so that's how we'll explain how
That's
he
how we
just
can
knows where
believe that
Felix
he
is
knows.
at all times.
Yeah. The professor himself doesn't do a lot of smart stuff. He really outsources it to Poindexter, who's still wearing his graduation cap.
Yeah, he totally is. I can't believe I didn't notice that that's the design they went with.
I love it.
Oh man, yeah. Are any of these side characters, do we know, do they ever show up in any media again? Because I'm interested to know what the Mizzards are doing.
I was about to say, if the Mizzards don't get a spin-off movie, I'm rioting. If you guys haven't seen the movie, or maybe watched the movie and just couldn't understand what was happening, there's mouse lizard hybrids that just come in and out of Felix's prison cell sometimes. And they do that because they ate the wall just enough to make their shape of their bodies holes to pass through the wall to get into his room. Like, it's so wild. And the fact that like he was like, "Can I go through?" And they were like, "Sure." And then they just chomped down the wall to be the size of Felix. I was like, what am I watching right now?
But not like a hole that's big enough that Felix could walk through it. They just cut like the silhouette of a T-posing Felix the cat out of the wall so that he could move through it perfectly.
And they don't really do a good job explaining why these Mizzards, who are able to come and go freely, have chosen to remain in indentured servitude and perform their tap dancing routine that nobody seems to enjoy.
Yeah.
Like, they don't like doing it. It's like a slapstick vaudeville tap dance routine. They don't like doing it, and the audience hates them. But they stick around. They just, they've made some friends there at the circus, I guess.
I guess so. I guess
it's not about the destination. Oh my gosh.
Can we address, I was not fully convinced that it was a musical until about 40 minutes into the movie. Because I thought it was just going to be an animated movie, and I didn't realize there were songs in it. And then the first song is just Felix is hiding in his bag, and then, is it foxes? That a bunch of them just come up and start, like, sniffing the bag, and then a disembodied voice just starts, like, singing about how the foxes are sniffing the bag. And then I was like, this is a really weird sequence, considering there hasn't been a song, like, introducing the main character, like how usually songs are put into animated movies. And then there just isn't another song for another like 25 minutes, and then there's the villain song where it's like in the circus, and then immediately after the villain song it's the tap dancing song.
Yeah, they really like load it all into one like 20-25 minutes of, all right, here's all of our musical numbers.
Yeah.
Like, we got a bunch for you, and we forgot to put them in before.
And then there's the princess dancing, which is a super weird plot line, because Felix is just like, I want to watch her dance, and like the dude who runs the circus is like, that's your payment, I guess?
Yeah. He's like, really? Okay, yeah, I guess so, man.
And this weird giant lizard who runs the circus that Felix is forced to be a part of. Oh, that's what it is. It's Felix was telling jokes the whole time, the first time he does the performance. And the lizard guy's like, you can't be telling your jokes suck. And
right. And that's another thing that like resonated with me as like this is about the Soviet Union is he's telling all these anti Duke of Zill jokes where he calls him a Zill pickle, and the audience hates it. They are very much they've drank the Kool-Aid on this, and they do not like their dictator being belittled. But yeah, it reminds me of that Soviet bloc of like, no, you can't make fun of the leadership, like that's not cool. It's just a weird thing to like put in this movie.
Yeah, a super weird thing to be in this movie.
I feel like there was such a weird era of just using animation as like a way to convey social politics as a story. You know what I mean? Like the Disney in the 40s with like World War II propaganda that they always made. I don't know if you guys are too into it, but
yeah.
It's so like interesting because I didn't even think about like watching this movie. I was like, this is a wacky movie, and now that you put that into like the perspective, I'm like, wow, what did I just watch?
Yeah, I totally didn't even think to put it in that like historical context, which makes it so much better now. Because when I watched it, my takeaway was definitely, look at how strange everything happening is. And I was just having so much fun with that.
Which I think is still a fair takeaway.
Yeah.
To be fair.
Because it is strange, and it's really fun with how strange it is.
Yeah.
Like the whole, No, you can go, sorry.
If we go back to like the very beginning, like the very first shot is this like 3D Felix the Cat head. It's like the Mario 64 opening almost, and they've used motion capture to animate his mouth. And it's Felix, and he's like, you guys all know me and the wild and crazy adventures I have. Well, this one is the weirdest one, and it's another dimension that I can never go back to. And then they just like start the show, and it's this very weird like explanation for, guys, this is going to be strange, and you don't have to ever worry about it like affecting the rest of the Felix world. Like this is just a one-off story, so don't freak out. But it really is. If you had to encapsulate the movie, like it's hard to say aside from he rescues a princess, like what the point is, other than to kind of show off like what I imagine like people in a collapsing Hungary probably actually felt about the way things were run,
Yeah. And also, mind you, like if we're talking about the plot being that he saves the princess doesn't even come into the movie until like probably 30 or 40 minutes in, right?
Well, she's like briefly shown at the start when all the cylinders are attacking her. Because it was
Felix only gets introduced to her.
Felix gets introduced to like the concept of her after he's already in prison.
And it's like, well, his goal wasn't even to save her, right? Am I wrong? Yeah. Like I don't even.
Yeah, he chases that. I think it's supposed to be a teardrop of hers.
Yeah,
is the way he ends up in this alternate dimension.
That makes sense.
And there's like a brief clip of her, and she's like, "This is as far as I can take you. You have to do the rest." And he's like, "Huh?" And then ends up in prison, and then doesn't find out what, aside from meet this blonde woman, he's supposed to do until he's face to face with her a good halfway into the movie.
Yeah. I guess that's what I'm trying to say is like, I guess he had some understanding, but also like he was just kind of wandering around doing his own thing and then accidentally stumbled upon it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, and it's really good.
It so fits. Like, I'm really glad that that's the way that they did it, was it's just, he was wandering around and then he saw something shiny and he's like, I'm going to chase the shiny thing. And now he's in a different dimension saving a princess.
To me, it's such a bold choice that you have this character with a bag of tricks that can do anything you imagine, like Green Lantern's ring kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they transport him into this wild, like, different world where everything is like crazy. Like there's frogs that are just legs with eyes at the end, like all sorts of like otherworldly stuff. And then they throw him in prison and take away his bag. And that's most of the movie, is they're like, well, you're not going to see much besides this prison cell and this cat with no powers left. And it's like, I don't know. It's wild that they like almost clipped his wings for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he still had his charm.
Right. He gets by on quips alone.
Yeah, he does.
100%. Were there any other characters you guys wanted to, like, I don't know. You weren't Johnny. How many voice actors did you say there were? Like, you said
There was, like, looking through the IMDb and the wiki, I've found a total of 9 people for this entire movie. For all the voices. Which, there was, like, I'm pretty sure if you look at the IMDb, most people credited with having a voice in this movie did more than one character.
Yeah.
That it was a lot of, it seemed like that team just kind of sitting down and... Yeah, the person who did the professor also did Grumper.
I'm seeing that, yeah.
Princess Oriana was her own. The Duke of Zil was also Whack Lizardi. And
Whack Lizardi. Could we talk about that for a second?
That's a really good name.
With his staff. Oh my gosh. It was just so funny. The scene where he spits on his staff, like the staff that he was holding in like its face.
Yes,
just
yes.
drenched. That
he was so mad at Felix's jokes. He was like trying to find the words to describe how bad his jokes were, and he just spits on his like right-hand man who's also just a stick.
Yeah. It kind of like scarred me. Like I think that's definitely going to be in my nightmares tonight.
That's fair though.
What a good character. I think that was probably my favorite character, to be honest.
The
staff, not the lizard.
I think my favorite supporting character is Pym, the backwoodsman who betrays Felix and then is quickly swayed into unbetraying him.
And I think that's another part of like Felix that I think is so funny is he kind of just is like, oh, okay, you're back on my team now. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it didn't really take too much to get him like back onto his side.
Yeah, I think that's what makes Felix so lovable is that he's like, you know, as long as you're not wronging him, he's pretty chill with you at all times.
Yeah.
And even then, if you've betrayed him, it's like, hey, come on, you don't want to really be bad, right? You don't like it here. And he's like, no, I guess not.
I guess you're right.
Yeah, because he gets dropped into a swamp, and then immediately Pym says something along the lines of like, yeah, you got to be careful because this is what the trees look like when they're like in bloom, but once the seeds come off the tree, they get pretty hungry. And then all of a sudden, the trees like sprout out, like they look like something out of Doom. Like just these like demon monsters that then just try to eat Felix, and then one of them captures him. And then he's just like, yeah, all right, I'll turn you in. And then while they're standing in front of the Duke, the scene that made me absolutely lose my mind laughing, just because of the way it's edited, is there's some conversation between, I don't remember if it's the Duke or Whack Lizardi. I think it might be Whack Lizardi is talking to Felix. And there's like the cylinders that are guarding like all of their like stormtroopers basically. There's one of them and Pym is just sitting on top of it. And the whole time the cylinder is like vibrating, and they just have through the entire scene you can hear the audio of Pym being like like sitting on top of it in the background for no reason.
But like the audio like disrupts the entire scene, like to the point where you can barely understand what's happening.
It's kind of mixed louder than some of the dialogue, so every once in a while there was a line that I would have to go back and try and like make sure I heard them right, because it sounds like he's just like yelling in the room that they're trying to have a conversation in.
So good.
It's like, so my favorite like weird scene is you know, and this is a movie where like everything is weird.
Yeah.
But somehow what boggled me the most is there's the scene where it's Grumper is back in the royal palace, and he's watching like a ballroom dance, like this like synchronized dance number of all these cylinder robots.
Yeah.
For no apparent reason why they've made the robots dance, why this guy is watching it. Like it's just a weird choice.
Yeah, and it's
so good.
I can't tell if it's like the kind of absurdist humor where it's just leaning into it so hard that you can't tell if it's a joke or not, or if it's just them being like, well, I don't know, we can't have this movie be 50 minutes long. We gotta like put something in there. And then they just have these weird scenes that don't really like that whole Fox scene didn't add anything, didn't really do anything to the movie, but it's just like a 2-minute musical number about like
Yeah.
there's foxes standing near Felix who's sitting in his bag, and that's it. But it's like really funny, and I'm still there through the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's like going back to that skull joke that they made. It took like 45 seconds to get the payoff for that joke, and then nothing happened with it. We never saw the skull again. But it was
it's interesting because it seems like the filmmakers had a lot of things they wanted to show us, and didn't necessarily have a particular story they wanted to tell us.
Yeah.
They're just like, we have a lot of like ideas and like a world we want to explore a little bit, but we don't really care about the the consequences or anything. It's just, look at this stuff we came up with.
Yeah, yeah. This must have been the most fun thing to make on the face of the planet. Like, it just seems so like, it seems like they so thoroughly enjoyed just making this movie.
Yeah, it's a shame that it like seemed to be a flop and got such a limited release, because I would be so curious to find out like what their thoughts were, like a director's commentary, an oral history
Yeah.
of like
a director's
like,
commentary would be
yeah.
priceless for this movie. So you said that this was a movie that like you grew up with. Is this like how much did you watch this growing up, or was this like
I was like, I'm not super old, so like I remember in like 1992, 1993, I was like, let's see, yeah, like maybe just barely starting elementary school, when I remember having this movie on VHS in my life. And I don't remember like wanting to sit down and watch it. I just like very clearly, like as an adult now, still like have very like clear visuals. Like it was such a like impactful, like interesting, like the design of all the creatures and the world, like it just stuck with me. And I couldn't have told you the plot until I rewatched it. I was like, I know it's Felix. I know there's like a hellish swamp and a lot of demonic looking creatures. But like as a piece of art, it like really like stuck in my head.
Yeah. It's definitely fair. You guys like, I think this is the number one. I mean, we're going to get to this portion of the podcast at some point, but definitely watch this one. There's most of the other episodes that we've done so far, I think it's been one where like, oh, if you like this, then watch this. I can't even comprehend like what to tell you should like to be able to watch this one. I think you just kind of have to watch it on your own. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's such a weird movie. It almost feels like one of those movies that they make for an album, like Pink Floyd or something.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like, yeah, we've got all this like interesting stuff that goes along with a little bit of music. But yeah, it like really is just more of an illustration than a piece of animation almost.
Yeah, I agree with that idea, because it was kind of like similar to making a movie for like a band like the Pink Floyd one, like you were saying. It was kind of more like, it felt more like a passion project than just trying to rake in money. Like it felt like they just had this IP that they can use that people know the name of and know what it looks like, and they were just like, let's just make something cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I for one, I didn't know this movie existed. I don't think Johnny did either.
I knew that it existed, but it was one of those like, I saw it once as a kid and it was like buried in the back of my mind. Like when I saw the Headhunters scene again, I was like, oh, I've definitely seen this before.
Okay.
Because that was like rooted somewhere deep in my memory.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something that I like consciously, if someone were to say like name an animated movie from like the late 80s, early 90s, this would not be like the first one I would have thought of.
Fair enough.
Sure, it's interesting because it's iconic, but it's almost defined by its obscurity.
For sure.
That's so true. Yeah, I never heard of this one. Like, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that it exists.
So one thing that I thought was interesting when I was like kind of looking into the movie, because like I said, as a kid, it was just a visual impression. I didn't know that much about it. So the director, the Hungarian guy who made this, also made all of those animated Red Bull commercials.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah, like between 92 and 2012, he was the dude who made all those, like, it gives you wings, like, you know, the like sketch outline, very European feeling Red Bull commercials.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't have made that connection, but once you see it, it's like, oh yeah, it's the same sort of like sight gag humor.
Yeah, 100%. I see that totally now. That's so wild.
Yeah, there was so much going on in this movie that I was just interested in just to see what they were going to do with it, even if the question never got answered. There was a lot of points where I was just like, oh, the bad guy's like army is just kind of a bunch of cylinders. Yeah, sure. Let's see where it goes. And then it's just like,
I remember that reminds me oh my gosh. The part where Felix is just in a cage and he like gets this, like it was like a poster, I want to say, of the princess, and he's like looking at it, and then one of the robots grabs it from him and they're like, this is not for you. And then they just rip it, but they don't just rip it once. They rip it again and then rip it again, and it just goes on, and I'm like, what are we doing here? What's going on? Like it's just so over the top. It's such a mess.
Yeah,
but
it's an oddly like emotionally like cruel thing to do for this robot that until then the army seems to be completely mindless, but you just get this like these little snippets of depth to these characters and locations, but the story itself doesn't lend any more to learning about it.
No, yeah, 100%.
Like the kingdom that he's there to save, presumably, we never see it. We only see this like hellish swamp world where the Duke of Zil grew up, know?
Yeah, don't we see like this the littlest of silhouettes in the distance or something like that? I could be
there's
wrong.
there's this one still shot of this city kingdom place, but we never see what the denizens are like or anything like that.
Yeah, that's so wild. That is, I don't even know what, this is one of those, me and Johnny were sitting down like trying to lay out where we should go with this episode, and we were just like, I can't tell if we're gonna have so much to talk about or so little to talk about with this one, because it's one of those where it just takes you for a ride, and you kind of, like, again, I had to watch it 2 times to know as much as I do about it right now. And even now, I'm like, I need to watch it again.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of impressions, but it's very hard to articulate. Like, there's just so much to digest.
Yeah. It's a lot to digest it should be, it's like its tagline. It's like Felix the Cat, the movie. There's a lot to digest.
There's that scene towards the beginning when Felix first enters this alternate universe where the room floods and there's all these like weird fish, and it's just this like showcase of like, look at these weird creatures we designed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he gets chased by that like manta ray shark thing.
That's so cool to me also.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, this is like the first big like hero in peril moment.
Yeah.
But then these other creatures that are like beetles with helicopters on them just saw off the shark's teeth, and like it's just immediately neutralized. And it's this weird thing where they like introduce the characters, here's the scenario, here's the danger, and then immediately take it away. So it's just Felix like making more jokes.
Yeah.
And it really feels like, I mean, we've said this before, it feels like they didn't want to tell the story, they just wanted to show you stuff.
Exactly.
And they're like, all right, well, let's get on with the story part so we can show you the next thing.
I feel like we haven't really touched on the art style of it all, and I think that's like pretty crucial to it. It feels like, again, it's in that spot where it really is a timestamp of like its times. It reminds me, it reminds me a lot of the game Space Ace, in the way that it is presented, but a little less polished. I don't know if you guys...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's got that, like, dragons... I think when I was talking about it, there was a point when I was like, the princess weirdly reminds me of the princess from Dragon's Lair.
Yeah. It's, and what were those? People made all the, like, YouTube poops out of them. The disc-based like Zelda games.
Yeah, Zelda CDI games. That was the other one where it totally reminded me of that whole era.
Yeah, it's somewhere between Dragon's Lair and then the what was
the
it?
Wand
CDI?
of Gamelon.
CDI, yeah.
Yeah, the CDI Zelda games. That's
Yeah.
what it feels like. By no means, I feel like also the characters kind of just like, for instance, the princess is made to look a little bit more human-esque, and then what was his name, Pib or something, or Pip?
Pim.
The
Pim, the little woodsman.
Pim is like super caricature of a human.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
it's funny like seeing those right next to each other where, I don't know, I feel like most cartoons wouldn't go that direction.
Yeah, it was very fun during the later scenes when they're trying to escape, when you see your lineup of realistic human woman, Felix the cat, and like crazy little prospector man. And then they get on like the scientific motorcycles that they're like, I guess the Duke didn't put them in his army because they were too fast, and then they just
That reminds me of the time where he was his nephew, right? Where the nephew like pulls out this vehicle that they use. The vehicle that they were using to traverse, I guess, through to the next dimension, and it was like a ski. It had like legs and then also a wheel.
Like it was like this like helicopter chassis almost, with one wheel in the front like a wheelbarrow, and then two like suction cup legs.
Yeah.
yeah.
And then he was
yeah, that
like,
was
"Oh,
an
I made it
interesting scene.
yesterday."
Because Poindexter, the little nephew, is like, yeah, I have this thing I invented that'll get us to the other dimension, but it just waltzes them into the elevator thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I invented this thing that travels between dimensions. It's, oh, I have a thing that will walk us to the place where we can use the device. Like,
It's wild.
Yeah, the one that we briefly mentioned it earlier, but the one that really got me was the whole wrap up to the movie when it is the Duke of Zil captures Oriana and gets her to show him where this Book of Power, was it not just called the Book of Power, or did they have a fancier name for it?
it might have been like Book of Ultimate Power.
Yeah,
but
that sounds right.
Relax, it's ultimate, okay?
Yeah. He gets the book and then he opens it up and it's just the page says like friendship, creativity, love on it, and then he's like, this sucks, and then he throws the Book of Power. And then he tells the
Oh my gosh.
Master Cylinder, is that the name? Because I think the Master
I think so. Yeah.
The Master Cylinder might be one of my new favorite characters in fiction, just based on the name alone, because that's so perfect. So it's the Master Cylinder looks like it's going to kill Felix and our like group of friends, and then Felix takes the Book of Ultimate Power and just hucks it at the Master Cylinder, and then it hits it, and then it short circuits and explodes, and then his entire army short circuits and explodes, and then the Duke of Zil goes, "I'll get you next time, Felix," and then evaporates.
Yeah, he just melts. He like falls down the stairs and melts for some reason, but not before I'll get you again, like whatever.
And then that whole thing happens, and then Felix, just because it's his reaction to everything, he's like, haha, okay. And then and then they just go about their day, and it's so fun to watch him just do whatever he does. Because every interaction he has is pure gold.
100%. So, what do you guys, like, would you recommend this, I guess, is a good place to go? Does anybody want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I would definitely recommend it. I had not seen it in probably 20 years, I guess, at this point, if not more.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to revisit and seeing the context of like when it was made, why it came out the way it did, I think makes it like extra fascinating. Like the parts that fail it as a story on its own, like I feel like those gaps are made up for, like knowing that there's like a lot of story that we don't see in how it was made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd say it's definitely worth a watch, 100%, at least for the charm alone. And now I'm probably going to rewatch it now that you've given me the insight of like the Soviet like explanation to it all, and I want to see like how much that actually changes like how I would go about watching it. But yeah, I'd say definitely worth a rewatch or a watch in general. and maybe 2 watches so that you can comprehend what's happening.
Yeah, this is such an interesting and unique movie that I think it's worth watching it just to be able to kind of say that you've experienced it. You know, it is. I don't think there's anything else that you could watch that will like capture the exact feeling I got watching this, where it's like kind of confused but still like interested with whatever's going on. And I'll give it this: there's never a point in this movie where I was like, I'm bored, I'm gonna be like looking down at my phone, like doing something else.
Yeah.
It's always going so fast. Also, it's only like 80 minutes, so it's not like it's gonna take that much time out of your day. Like, you're fine to sit down and crush through this movie and then just have it like sit on your conscience for the next however long it's gonna be, as you just like
just watch it and then
everything
harp on it.
Yeah, to me, like, and like, I know we've only touched a little bit on the historical context, but it's like really weird to think about this, like Felix the Cat, which is like an American property, for whatever reason was developed in Hungary, which at the time was under what I guess is nicknamed goulash communism, where it was this like smorgasbord of like some free market stuff, like a lot of like liberal ideas mixed in with like traditional like Leninist policy. And you know, like the US was not really working with the Soviets at this point.
Yeah.
So it was interesting that they like worked with a Hungarian animation company that was like supposed to be this bastion of like, look, like capitalism and free market can work here side by side with us, as the whole thing is collapsing around themselves. And you gotta wonder, like, all the characters and like all the settings seem to just point towards this one sort of setting that like is just this little piece of time.
Yeah. All of that. I don't even know how to put it in words, how this movie plays out and how it works. And I think we haven't even been able to give it justice of like just how over the top bizarre of a film it really is, and how odd that it was able to exist, honestly, because again, like, this isn't a movie that could release. I don't even think it would be able to release, let alone do okay in 2019. So, I think.
But this is something that I do wish that more people strived for today, which is just making something that is this complete absurdist level of just showing different and weird things, which, like we've said several times, that is what this is it's a full showcase of everything that the designers felt like they wanted to throw into the movie, and it all works so well just being that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird that they've decided that a movie about a talking cat with a magic bag is only very barely about that at all.
Yeah, this movie could easily have existed and not had Felix the Cat be a part of it at all. And it would more or less, like, if you just gave literally any other character with some sort of MacGuffin tool that's able to do whatever they need at that specific time, you could make this exact same movie without Felix the Cat. But it's just made so much more interesting that cat that I definitely recognized because there were those novelty clocks of him.
Yeah.
It's like all over this movie.
Yeah, and it's like, even for me, like at the time, like Felix the Cat was not a cartoon that kids my age watched. Like the same thing. Like there was like the iconography of like the cat clocks and that sort of thing, but like he was really like not a relevant thing even back then. And it's weird to have this like fish out of water with this character that we really only know through like references to references at this point. Like who has actually seen a Felix the Cat cartoon like besides this movie?
Yeah, it very much feels like this is a character that I would recognize more so from probably a joke in The Simpsons than to see him in his own property.
Yeah, like it feels like it feels like the closest connection I've ever had to Felix before this was like watching a cartoon and they're watching a cartoon that's supposed to be similar to Felix the Cat or something. Like that's what, or I'd watch a TV show and then they have a Felix the Cat clock in it. It feels like there's such a barrier between what I know of Felix the Cat, and that's why. But I guess more or less he has been in my life because of that for a good amount. So it's pretty wild that we see him doing all this.
Yeah, it is a very big difference from it went very 0 to 100 real quick with I knew nothing about Felix to now I have this emotional attachment because I went through this journey with Felix.
This is just a ridiculous journey.
Yeah, it reminds me, because he is almost from the same time, is like the silent movie stars, like Harold Lloyd and stuff that I know by name really only, but who have really shaped all movies since then. And I think Felix the Cat probably had a similar thing. You know, there's a lot of you see a lot of Mickey Mouse in him. There's a lot of modern cartoons and the way he has aside comments like Looney Tunes, like Animaniacs. He's definitely shaped the landscape, and we never saw the original the Felix, you know, and to revisit him in this thing that is clearly alien to him as well as to us is just a fascinating way to be introduced to the actual character. I don't know. It's just so much to think about.
Yeah. 100%. 1000%. I don't know. I guess there's not really much else I even know what to talk about with this one. So if you want to round this one out, I guess we all universally agree we should watch it.
Absolutely.
Everybody watch it. It's worth your time. It's 80 minutes and it's free on YouTube. So you kind of don't have any excuses. So just let me know. Let me know what you think. Vrunt, can you just go ahead and let us know where we can find you? You said you're on a podcast and stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. My handle's Vrunt on pretty much every single social media platform, including Venmo if you need to just send me money for no reason.
Yes.
I produce a podcast called WrestleSplania. Even if you're not into wrestling, it is an interesting perspective of pop culture and wrestling and just why it is the way it is. It's not like a smarky thing where you have to know it. It's you can tune into Macho Man Randy Savage and immediately get it. So check out WrestleSplania. I occasionally have produced one episode of Friendly Men. Who knows if that's going to continue. But yeah, just follow me online and you'll see all sorts of weird stuff I'm up to.
Yeah, and it's VRUNT, by the way, guys. Johnny is the one that introduced me to his Twitter, and it's phenomenal. It's peak Twitter, in my opinion.
Yeah,
he's also
for sure.
just doing, I really appreciate whenever people, I think my favorite forms of comedy is when people take a bit that shouldn't exist and then also just continue to run with it and make it way larger than it already should have not existed. So you guys just check out Vrunt on Twitter. Yeah, definitely.
There was a point where for about a week straight, I would have conversations with people that would just devolve down to, is Fargon dead yet? Every time one of those polls would come out and it would determine that Fargon is not dying today, I would lose my mind laughing because I knew that it just meant one more day.
That was such a weird, to be in the moment where it's all right, I'm just leaving this to a poll online, and then for it to come out as a tie multiple days in a row. And I was like, you know what? This character who I picked an image and a name and said he's annoying. And then I was like, you know what? I've committed 100%. I'm just going to see where this takes me. And yeah, what a wild ride. God bless Fargand, living or dead.
And can I just, because I just genuinely want to know, what was the point when you realized that the parents of Wolfman was the peak comedy is ever going to get? Because I think it might be.
There was so a little behind the scenes for a Wolfman parent. Mm-hmm. my original plan to kill that off was the moment that the son was upset that his name was Drewbert. I was just going to I was going to pull the plug, and Rachel, my girlfriend, said, she's like, no, you can't just keep pulling the rug out from everyone all the time. Like, people want to see more of this. And I was like, that's what's so funny. And she's like, no, come on, trust me, keep this going. And so at that point it was completely off the rails because I no longer had a planned ending. I was like, I know I have to keep this going. But it was this weird, very weird exercise, and I'm glad that it resonated with people so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rachel's in the background shouting at me.
Oh, man. Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, the context was that there was a bit that lasted for so long. It was weeks. Where it was just... His entire Twitter was transformed into the Twitter that was owned by a parent of a son who suspected that their son was a wolfman. And that's the whole bit. And it just keeps carrying on and getting stranger and stranger. And it became... I was obsessed with it. Where I just... every day I'd just be sitting around and I would just... There was points in class multiple times where I would just start, like, laughing to myself for no reason. And someone would be like, what's wrong? And I would be like, pack of wolves. And just, that's all it took.
I feel like...
That was...
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it was such a wild ride even for me because I was like, I know I have to keep this going until the full moon. I was like, how am I gonna pad out a week of this? I don't know what's going on with this man's life. All he's concerned about is his wolfman son, and that's all I know about him.
And then starts watching The Sopranos.
Like, you wrote part of it based off of like our roommate's dog getting to the garbage.
Oh yeah. Rachel just reminded me that. That the Wolfman son was also based on our roommate at the time's dog, who was getting into the garbage every single night. So we would come out from my bedroom, and it's just the entire living room is redecorated with trash, and there's a guilty-looking dog. And so, it's definitely a little bit emotionally charged for me.
Oh my god, that makes it so much better.
It really does. We were going through like trying to whenever we were going. Oh gosh. We were going through our first round of like thinking of who we should invite onto the podcast and stuff like that. So that pretty much just included us going to our YouTube channels, looking at our like subscription lists, and then just, shooting all those people emails. And
sure.
Then Johnny was like, "Oh, let's invite this Twitter guy." And I was like, what does he do? And he's like, I kind of can't even tell you. Like, you kind of just have to look at his Twitter account. And by the end of the night, I was like, let's invite this Twitter guy. It was so good.
Well, I'm really glad you guys did. I had a lot of fun revisiting this movie with you.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely send some more recommendations your way. I know a lot of other like animation heads, I guess, who like definitely influence like me now, who are just way more into the medium than I could ever, even possibly keep track of.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for that.
So again, he's at Vrunt, VRUNT on Twitter. And if you want to find Johnny, what are you popping at?
At Johnny Hayes on everything, JOHHNYHAZE. I make art, I tweet about whatever I'm thinking about, and half my feed is retweeting whatever he posts.
And then on Twitter, I'm Carl Jacobs _. It's Carl with a K. Again, if you have a C in your name, the C is just kind of a useless letter when you think about it. So it's just the truth. And then this show is at Toon Overload on Twitter. It's TOONOVERLOAD. And then Instagram, it's Toon Overload Show. If you want to email us anything, just, Felix fan art, or if you have a better email to give us, like a guest, check it out at cartoonoverloadshow@gmail.com. It was a good show. Thank you so much, Nate, for being on.
This was a really good one.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. And Johnny, if you want to send us off.
I don't have something fun, but listen to the Princess song from this movie, and then listen to the Wu-Tang Clan's Cream, because they sound shockingly similar. That's your homework.
All right. Good night.
Okay, good night.
Night.